All right, we're back on the frame project this morning. You can see I got some fancy camper jack stands to level out my my jig. I set the laser up there on the front of the assembly and just flattened the jig out with those stands. It worked really good. Then still got to tighten down the screws. I just tighten it back to the rotisserie in that location so that everything's locked in and it won't move. Then I set my frame rails in. These are the brackets I designed to hold the back of the rails. I marked my jig as to where the end of the frame rail goes, just as a rough start. I got to square it all up and do that after the fact, but for what I'm doing right now, that's working perfect. I got my bracket here, and you can see I have my clamp pads worked out fantastic. Just put these little pads on the bottom of the clamps so that I can pinch down with a clamping force and it's not going to try to fall off there. So, putting it all back together, however, I quickly realized there's an issue. Somehow I pulled in this angle wrong, or that angle. I'm going to go through and measure it all together, but this angle drew too much, so it messed everything up. And now the biggest issue is these pads are not all in the same plane. Those are headed uphill. So now's the time to correct it, obviously. It's not a hard correction. It should be fairly easy to work out. I've just got to figure out where the discrepancy is. I have worked out all the angles and figure out where I messed up. And I think, you know, I don't have a big flat table to weld this up on. I should have built my jig up and put it right in here when I tacked it up, and then everything would have been perfect. But I didn't do that. I just got to figure out which angles are jacked and release them, re-weld them, and that will be that. So I'm going to get going on that this morning. First thing I'm going to do, however, is like I said, I leveled up and got my rears in tight first so that I know these two rails are right and they're in proportion to each other. And I'm just going to start working forward from there. I think that's easier because I'll have more leverage to do things out front than it would be working from the front back. So I'm going to take my measurements and figure this all out. Okay, so got this all cut, tacked it all back together, no big deal. Everything's laying in the jig nice and flat now, no issues. Just made sure I was maintaining my spacing up here. Everything is right where it's supposed to be. I released all the clamps, made sure it just sat in there naturally. It looks pretty good. So I'm now going to pop these two rails out, finish weld those, grind a V-groove in it, finish weld them, and I'm ready to go. All right, so I've slapped the outer rails in the jig. I went ahead and made up the body mounts. I got to look and see if the short one goes up front or let's grab the one that's less hot. So one of these mounts goes in the front, which is this one, and it goes in like so. I got to clean this up with a grinder, but this is the long mount. This goes up here, and the short mount goes back here. So let's see. And then there's a diagonal piece that ties in to the back. Now I got to look at how all this goes together, but that's the way I understand it. Again, one thing you find with this square tubing is there's a welded seam, and you can see it right here. And that kind of interferes with the slot, so you got to take a small sander and knock that off before you can insert it. So, okay, I'm gonna try to just mock this up a little bit so I can tack some stuff together, and I'll bring you back and show you what I got. All right, so that's how the body mounts click in. You gotta make sure you have them up nice and tight against the back panel with these tabs sticking through, or at least making sure it's flush in there. So that's a little tricky. One thing you do have to, I gotta look into is this, I don't know if there's meant to be a slot there or what. And then this keystone here is weird. Again, I don't know if that's meant to leave a gap. I will research that a bit and try to figure out where that all gets tied in. And then there's a backer plate that fills in this section, which is over on the bench. So the next step is I want to check this out before I weld up too much. And then I'll get this back, get those rails welded up, get the, I got to get the cross pieces made up that go in here. And I should be good to start putting in this in the jig more permanently. So I'm gonna break for the day probably. I know there wasn't a lot of content today, but I just spent a lot of time adjusting and tweaking on the jig, trying to get it all squared up and set up right, and I did. So that'll pay dividends down the road. Now, NerdRod says you don't need a jig to build this, and you really don't. If you had a nice big flat welding table, you'd be fine. If you wanted to do this on the floor and you had a nice flat floor section, you'd be fine. I don't, I'm not gonna work on the floor. So having it up right up here in my teeth is a better solution for me. And my welding table is very small, so it's good for doing small assemblies, but not necessarily, this size assembly. So this jig is working out really well. My intention is to take all of these plates that I have clamped in right now, where my brackets are, once I'm convinced they're where they need to be, I'm gonna drill and tap holes for those into the jig so that I can bolt those pieces up. And then I'll mark them so that I know when I'm working on this frame or another frame like it, I know exactly where they need to go. And I'll take you through that process when I get to it. So the side rails are next. Get that all summed up, worked out. Like I said, I've got some research to do here, figure out what's going on with this. Knowing Russell, there's something else that's meant to click in there or here. So I'll get all that going next. Get these side rails on, then I'll get the cross braces in, set it in here, square it all up good, and weld up the cross braces. So there's one that goes back here, one that goes back here, and one that goes right across the tail section. So that's the plan. So far so good. Like I said, I spent a lot of time today just working on the jig, getting the jig properly lined up and squared up and flat so I can check everything with levels and squares and all those good tools. And again, this is the mid-mount kit. This is not the low one. The low one does not have these risers. The standard one has about 3 inches of riser. So it's very versatile the way he's got it set up. He just changes that riser or eliminates it depending on the height you want for the body. Good design. But anyway, I am going to, like I said, research this a little bit. There must be something else that goes in there that I'm just not figuring out right now in my diminished state. But we're looking good. I'll get these pieces welded in next time. Get all that welded up. I kind of find there's a point where I got to stop. If I'm just getting a little too tired, my welds go to shit. So I really want to, do a nice job, keep everything nice and clean, and move through this. Then I start the nose section, which goes up through there, and then tying all that together. So there's a lot to do. A lot of pieces to weld yet. Lots of welding. Lots and lots of welding, but it'll be worth it. This looks like a really nice design, so very happy with it so far. Haven't really found anything that has not fit perfectly, which is why I'm questioning this and that. I might go have a look. Maybe there's another piece in there that looks just like that. I don't think so, but maybe. Anyway, that's the way it is right now. So stay tuned for more later.